Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Performance Strategies and Stumbles podcast with me, your host Dan Howells. I've got Jack Oaten here for his second episode where we dig into the stumbles he has experienced in his relatively short career so far. As an emerging practitioner, Jack is the youngest individual we've had on the show so far, and so I know he really had to dig deep here to reflect honestly and open up about some of his experiences. So I hope that everybody can learn something from what he shares today. We will head over to that episode in a moment, but I just want to reference the group mentorships that Collaborate Sports hosts will be relaunching for second cohorts in July. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to hear a little bit more about what I've got in store and what programs we'll be developing and releasing with other co-mentors that are on the Collaborate Sports journey with me. So that's it from me. Let's head over to the episode with Jack right away. So welcome back to part two here, the stumbles segment of the podcast here with Jack Oaten. And I've asked Jack to reflect on some key mistakes or stumbles across his career. So where are we going to start, Jack?
Well, take your pick. I've made a lot of them. So I think a key sort of stumble that I can think back to, especially early on, when I say early on, I'm still hopefully quite early on. It's early on in my career. My first sort of role out of university was... I was probably a bit guilty of microwaving the learning process for the athletes that I was working with. And by that, I mean, I always strive for perfection within my sessions. So whether that be session planning, whether it be the exercise selection, whether it be the cues I was going to provide them, I was essentially planning sessions down to a T and would try and cover all the bases for any sort of potential threats to that session. And don't get me wrong, it's fundamental practice that we prepare well, and we go in with very defined objectives and outcomes. But I think reflecting back, it was almost a bit of a protective approach to take, and it actually probably hindered a lot of what I was striving for in terms of long-term development of motor learning, skill acquisition, and changes in movement quality within these youth athletes. Because I would almost try and create the session to be foolproof, and it would influence my exercise selection, so that exercise that I knew that I could coach well and that couldn't go wrong. And I didn't want to go too far outside the remit of my plan, because ultimately that's an unknown, and with unknowns often comes anxiety and all that sort of stuff. So I think it was a big reflection point for me when I sat down with my line manager at the time and told him about that. And it was actually that learning inherently requires failure and reflection. Without it, we're unlikely to move forward and improve. So of course we always... And
also your athletes, right? Not just
course,
you.
Yeah. I'm on about them more specifically than me, but I guess it applies both ways, of course. But it's learning that sure, we always need to have these objectives and strive for progress and success within those sessions. But I needed to have a broader bandwidth of what I was willing to accept, and I needed to learn that learning is messy. Like the athletes are going to fail, you're going to fail. But it's not about the failure itself, it's what you can take from it, it's how you can iterate yourself or improve yourself off the back of it. And I found that actually the guys improved more when I shut up and let them explore the movement. They failed, I then provided some of my thoughts. They then they fail a bunch more times, they then get it right twice. And then, as I said before, fail a bunch of times, get it right 3 times. Yeah. And it's almost just, sit back and breathe the session in a little bit.
So I'm hearing that, there was a practitioner that was consumed by perfection. And you must have spent a lot of hours programming, preparing for that perfect, I guess, program or session. And were you trying to cover too many bases because you were trying to be perfect?
I think so. Upon reflection, I think that I think back to the times now where I would be working and toiling and stressing over these session plans coming up and making sure that they were the best things since sliced bread. But ultimately what I've then learned, as what I've said before, but in addition to that is adhering to some key principles of the phase that I'm in, the time of the year, what are the sort of needs and the actual priorities that these athletes require right now. And if I can anchor some principles to those, it almost takes the emotion and the doubt out of it. And it makes me far more confident with then programming and delivering that program.
If we go back to your first episode, the strategies segment, one of your key principles was got to get extreme clarity on what it is you're trying to influence. And I guess my challenge to you then is, on reflection, did you program design with lack of clarity of what you were actually trying to do? Were you thinking about programming from this point onwards as opposed to where I need to get the athlete to as an endpoint?
I think so, and I think that's undoubtedly a very common stumble that a lot of early practitioners make. It's very much a focus on the here and now, and like I said before, you're wanting to make sure that you have a perfected session within a week or perfected microcycle, but actually, like you said, it's ensuring that you have a wider lens to look at the end goal for these athletes. Ultimately, a lot of them, when I was working in a school-based environment, was changes. They were at a point where we just wanted to get them more technically sound and develop some general strength. And there are, as we know, certain principles that we can adhere to that. And I think if I knew that back then, I would have had far more of a relaxed approach and would have been far more, I guess, clear. If we're going to talk about that clarity principle, far more clear on what I was trying to achieve.
So how has it changed you now in terms of a practitioner? Has it relaxed you? Has it, with that talk from that line manager that you sought some support from, how has it changed you? What do you do differently now? Do you have a specific approach you take to the way you program? Do you have a play component to everything you do just to create exploration in things? How has it influenced you now as a practitioner?
So I think first and foremost, I think it's probably it's helped me develop and design and have a set of, and I keep talking back to it, I know it's a big sort of tenet of principles, and I think anchoring to those principles of training, whether it be maximum strength training, power, speed, technical competency, and making sure that I'm letting those guide my session design and programming, that, like I said, it takes out any sort of self-doubt or emotion about it for me, and that then again allows me to implement that really confidently, I guess, and really well. I guess, so it's a good question. I think
it's tough because it'll be in another 2 years' time, you'll be reflecting on you now and what you do, and you'll be more clear about it again. I think it's interesting because you say you're at this early stage of your career, so there might not be too many mistakes, to be honest, to reflect on.
And I think just going back to the previous question, I think having, and it's something simple, is the collaboration you have with the tactical coaches and staff around you, and what is the end goal, having things like an annual plan, which is made not just through the strength and conditioning department or staff, it's made collaboratively with the wider group. That can be magic, like gold dust, in terms of, again, keeping your eyes to the future. What is the overarching goal that I'm trying to develop or prepare these athletes for? And then again, reverse engineering from that, then again gives you extreme clarity and confidence in the programming in the week and in the day, etc.
It sounds like you're much more aware of how to utilize those people in that interdisciplinary team, the IDT, around you now. I'm assuming there was an element of a team around you in your early career in this reflection, but were you just siloed and blinkered in your program design? You go, I'm going to program design in my mind because it's my role, and therefore that shut off your opportunities to understand what you're really programming for, because you didn't ask the questions to the other disciplines, like the technical coaches, of like, what are we actually working towards here?
Yeah, 100%. And it was one thing that I reflect back on, and I kind of chuckled to myself a little bit about how I used to operate like that. But yeah, it was one of those things where we were an IDT in my sort of early roles, but I think for me, it was perfectly like you said there, I was very much doing it because I thought it was my role, and I don't think that the cross-pollination between disciplines and being aligned and in what you're trying to achieve, it didn't really occur to me. And it sounds really basic error, but again, in your early career, you learn, you learn as S&C coach, you learn your role was to do this, you learn X, Y, Z, but actually now reflecting upon it, and now what I do currently in my role is try to be far more proactive and seek out opportunities to collaborate and cross-pollinate, as we call it, between disciplines, to ensure that the interventions we're giving these guys are as aligned and as optimal and as beneficial as possible for them and what they currently need.
And I don't think you're saying anything that emerging practitioners wouldn't maybe be experiencing themselves now. They're like, well, I don't have conversations with coaches about program design because I'm the one writing the programs. It's for me to decide. But that's probably a product of how we learn, right? We learn quite explicitly. We learn through textbooks. We learn through right and wrong. And then suddenly we're into a world of application, and we transfer that as, okay, well, A plus B equals C. But actually, what if, and we've talked about this in the school system, people jump into maybe the school systems or youth systems and think fitter, faster, stronger. But actually, what if the main merit of you as an SC coach is helping them understand that physical activity is beneficial for lifelong benefit beyond sport, exactly. Or in the big bad world of life. So that's cool. So what other things have you reflected on in terms of mistakes, stumbles you've made? Is there anything around injuries on your watch? Is there anything around conflict? Is there anything around, applying for jobs? Anything like that?
I think one that occurs to me, and I think that we might touch on other ones later, but I think for now, another one that really sticks out as a stumble is how I communicated, especially in my early roles with athletes. I think that it was the classic case of word vomit. And I found myself with an athlete, say, who was doing a set of an exercise, and there was lots of fires going on in terms of, that the range of motion isn't quite where I wanted it to be, but actually their back is rounding a bit, and all these different things going on. And it would often lead to me wanting to try and put out all those fires at once, and just word vomiting and over cueing, over communicating to the athlete, which actually then often left them just as confused and didn't really have a huge amount of clarity on the major work ons for the next set, and actually then led me to having to re-explain it to them. So ultimately it didn't help anyone. It just wasted energy, wasted time for us both. So I found that, I guess my one learning is one way to ruin a completely good cue is to add another. And I found myself probably instructing more than I was coaching, I guess, in those early days. So I think how that's impacted me in my practice now is it's almost to take a minute, or take a second, you probably might have a minute, but take a second, deep breath, watch what you're seeing, identify what could be the biggest fire. What I've learned is actually there could be a fire that if you put that out, it actually puts out the rest of them. And I think that for me often comes within like the postural realm. So if I can help and improve posture within this certain exercise or how they're moving, then, for example, range of motion is often improved as well. So it's trying to say more with less.
I think I say to people about, what's the most effective way you can be a coach is to get people to change in some way, whether that's movement, behavior, intent, by saying as least as possible. And that for me is a really effective coach. Just somebody giving somebody a constraint, an externally driven constraint that has no words of, okay, just push your chest towards that wall. An externally focused cue could clean up everything you've just said, as opposed to me going, well, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. It's very anti-performance language, right?
Exactly.
And it draws people to the negative connotation of what they're not doing right, as opposed to just focusing on that one thing. So it sounds like you've learned to prioritize your language, prioritize your communication.
Prioritize language, but also, as you said, I've tried really hard to vary up how I cue and communicate. So as you say, using constraints,
how did you build that skill set for yourself? Was it trial and error, or was it watching other people coach? Because this is the thing that isn't in a textbook.
Yeah, I think both. I think I very much trial and error, and over the last couple of years, I've hopefully finally getting more success than failure. But also the failures, we know, as I said before, is still incredibly important to keep improving. But I think also watching others. An example I can think back to is that the head of strength and conditioning at Loughborough Sport now gave me a really good example of coaching someone through a Turkish get-up who's never done one before. And it's like, it would be so easy for you to get right. Okay, so you need to keep the kettlebell above your head. You need to put your hand here. You need to sit up. You need to list off all the movements they want. And he very rightly says, well, that's not coaching, that's instructing. You're just instructing someone. Right, stand up from that position you're in right now, but just try and keep the kettlebell above your head.
And it's actually more fun as well, right? Like, it gives more of a challenge to the athlete. It gives them more of this external focus, which we know as a coaching cue, obviously greatly with the work of Nick Winkelman and is better adhered to and more understood by athletes anyway. But we do, and I've been guilty of it myself, just word vomit or trying to complexify the situation to make myself sound better. Like, let's be honest, I think we've all been guilty of that. And I don't think it's succeeded for anyone in any realm. Like, simplicity wins for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
What about, is there any other reflections you've had, in the preparation for chatting today?
The other one that I thought of was And it was something that I read very early on in one of Dan Cleather's books, the little Black Book of Training Wisdom. And he has that sort of cardinal rule of training, which is if you want to get better at something, you do it lots and you do it again and again. It's that consistency principle, I guess. And I think this is probably a very generic and very common stumble. But again, early on in my career, I would regularly change up my sessions and my programs, every 4 weeks and every sort of half term within the school-based system. Mostly probably out of insecurity for the fact that I might be losing engagement with them, but also maybe on reflection might have been insecurity with myself about getting bored of them getting bored of the same program. But I think it was just, again, reflecting on the fact that adaptive capacity is obviously so much bigger than first thought. It's not, you're not going to soak up all the adaptations you can make of one exercise after 4 weeks. And there are so many ways that we can window dress the same program or the same exercises to continue getting the adaptations or the gains or the benefits we want, but to keep that variety of that stimulation up, I guess. And again, it comes back to that principles. If I have my principles of what I'm trying to chase and clarity on the adaptation, then there are so many different methods and where you can achieve the same principle. And that has been a big learning point for me, especially in probably the first 2 or 3 years of my career.
We're kind of confined, aren't we, to this binary approach of like a month-long period of 4 weeks, and a 7-day period for a microcycle. And actually, my transition to baseball made me think completely differently because we just used 5-day rotations for training programs because pitchers pitched every 5 days. And it was like, okay, like there are different ways to do things. And actually, we can do 10 of these 5-day cycles, 50 days worth of work, and get much more frequency into people and probably stress an adaptation that we want with far more efficiency. But we're a little bit driven towards black and white, aren't we, in these set guidelines. So it's cool. In terms of one question I wanted to ask you was, we've all felt like we've made a mistake or there's been an error and we've panicked. Can you remember any times of panic in your work? Because essentially we can associate that to a potential mistake.
Right.
Anything you can think of there?
Yeah, I think more broadly speaking, it is probably quite a defining period of my career so far. Is I was coming to the end of a role that I had at Winning School. It was a Millfield school that I was working at, which was an excellent experience for 2 years. But as part of that graduate program, the end of those 2 years meant that I then had to move on, which was fine. I was obviously on my way to hopefully landing my next role, and then unfortunately got injured quite badly playing rugby and managed to do my knee in pretty well.
It was a big one, wasn't it?
It was quite a big one, yeah. I managed to do almost everything, so it wasn't much of a knee after that, but then thankfully managed to get surgery on it quite quickly. But ultimately that then threw up a lot of uncertainty around my future from a professional perspective. I wasn't able to work for a long period of time. I was sort of sofa bound and on crutches for 12 plus weeks. So that's not a great advert if you're turning up to an interview as an S&C coach and people are looking at you up and down and you're waddling into the interview room. So it created a lot of panic for me. I think it probably created a lot of initial anxiety about what the future might hold and would I ever be able to work in not a role again per se, but just would opportunities that would be right for me pass me by because of this injury. Would I guess one of my fears was I going to then jump into a role that perhaps wasn't right for me purely because it was being offered and purely because of the anxiety of this injury. And I think that a huge learning for me from that is having a very clear list, or it doesn't have to be long, it's just your needs and wants. So, what are some of the things that you need to fulfill your life from a financial, professional, personal perspective, but also what are some of your wants that you might want out of a role. And I think having a list of my needs and wants and trying to live true to them as much as I can actually probably prevented me from panicking into perhaps making a mistake in terms of what that next role would be.
On that period, because it was quite a long period, we were in communication quite a lot around that period because you were part of what we were doing with the mentorship, and luckily I hope that needs and wants perspective of what we did on that soft skills pathway brought this to life for you. But you've obviously felt anxiety and stress in that period. If you could go back to you then, what advice would you give yourself? Would it be that, like, do you look back on that and laugh at it, or was it an appropriate feeling of emotional stress?
Yeah. I think it's human nature. I don't think I don't think you're ever going to not feel the feelings that I felt in terms of the anxiety and the not knowing, the uncertainty, the sort of catastrophic thinking about what, all the possible things that could go terribly wrong. But I think having a very solid network of support around me, so yourself, but also other practitioners in my network and family, friends, partner, that's one massive thing that got me through, was being able to voice my concerns, have some people who perhaps a little bit more rational at the time, a little bit more neutral, and talk them through my worries. But also when job opportunities came up, which might have challenged and didn't necessarily align to those needs and wants, again, having those around me to speak to and to talk through and weigh up the pros and cons and make me realise, make me continue to live out those needs and wants was imperative.
And were you, I mean, because we're anchoring onto it, it was a stumble that was out of your control as such. The injury was the injury. It sounds like you avoided more stumbles. It sounds like you took control of the situation quite early and recognised that there could be stress and associated with it that would limit you. But were you really focused on elite sport? I'm really interested in at that point. Was it a narrow focus, or were you open-minded to other ways to use your S&C skills?
I think, reflecting back, and honestly, I was probably still quite keen to work in that elite sport space. I don't think it's really until I've come into the role I am in now and working within a university environment and all the security and benefits and things that it provides you within that I've probably had my sort of my gaze widened a bit, and I am starting to seek out opportunities to utilise the skill sets we get as SSC coaches outside the realms of elite sport and whatever that might be. But I think early on in my career, I would have given anything to have worked in an elite sport environment, wear the badge, have all the things that come with it. Probably quite ego driven, if I'm honest. But that was the old me. I think the new me is very much, if I'm, like I said, those needs and wants that within that role, financially, time, travel, the type of athlete I'm working with, opportunities for progression within that organisation are being met and satisfied, then to me, ultimately, it doesn't matter where it is.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I just knew, as a practitioner, I knew you then, and I know you now, and you're very typical of a motivated, passionate person coming out of that graduate type of opportunity with a wealth of knowledge, ready to apply it and thinking, right, my place is elite sport. And you were looking, weren't you? You were interviewing in elite sport environments then. And so, if you're comfortable with this, I think we're just going to share that, you went through that experience with some job offers that, again, they weren't stumbles because you didn't take them, but they could have been, because they were, not that well paid, but they were the opportunity on the table at the time, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so do you think they would have been mistakes to take those roles?
I think I can say with confidence that I don't regret the role I'm in now. Obviously, you can never understand or predict what the future might have held, but I think more importantly, talking about there's a couple offers that occur in my head. One of which was a London-based role, which again, like you said, that it wasn't particularly well remunerated, and again, it could have been very easy for me to have uprooted my life and moved there because it would have been employment. But I would have. Well,
it solved the problem, right? I needed a job, and I got offered a job, but it didn't fit your needs and wants.
No, it didn't. It didn't fit the financial sort of needs or wants, how it would relate to family and the rest of that sort of thing. And then similarly, a role abroad, which again, just at that time in my career, just it didn't align to again the needs and wants around being close to family, being there for family members. So that's I don't think I regret at all the decisions I made, and I think you said that it's all worked out pretty well so far.
So I mean, in that sense, the stumble was the injury, which was not necessarily a mistake you made. Maybe go and play rugby.
Yeah,
on that day was a mistake, but it taught you a few good lessons, I guess, that you'll carry on to your future. And for those listening, for those that hearing me and Jack talk about needs and wants, and go, what are they talking about? It's essentially just understanding what you absolutely need in your role as a non-negotiable, and what you want, as in what's nice to have, and understanding the difference between your personal life and your role. And I think you were really clear about, use the example there of I need to be available for family. Okay, well, this London job or this job abroad doesn't serve me that. So it's about us being as clear about what you don't want to do to get the best out of yourself in the next role, as much as what you do want to do. And I think that's probably a mistake you could have made around that injury, which you didn't. And I know you had some conversations with some key people at this time, but to focus your attention on outcome of what I need, as a role, I need this role, I need money, I need to take the next step. So that's a really good lesson for people to listen to today. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. No, it's right. It's good to share it, and it's nice that hopefully that by sharing it, that hopefully some others might not stumble into the same stumble.
Yeah, exactly. So look, let's wrap up there, because I think that's a really nice place to finish. It's awesome to see you doing so well. It's awesome to see you doing great work. It's awesome to reflect with you. I think if we can encourage other people to reflect in the same way that you have, that's brilliant. But from me to you, Jack, personally, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. And on behalf of the listeners, thanks so much for sharing so candidly today.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been awesome.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening to that from Jack. What really resonated to me was some experiences he shared and stumbles that he's experienced are probably the same as most of us have experienced at some point in our career. So I hope everybody can take something from tuning in today. I'd like to tee up next week, and you can look forward to me welcoming Simon Harries over onto the podcast. He's going to be sharing some insights into rehab running frameworks. And I also just want to mention the group mentorships that Collaborate Sports is relaunching in July for our second cohort of the year. I'll be running multiple group mentorships alongside co-mentors like Sean McLaren, where we'll be hosting a pathway on data skill development. Also Rob Anderson, where we'll be looking at long-term athlete development as a group mentorship. And also Rehab Simplified with Dr. Andy McDonald. Each one of these mentorships aims to create some clarity for practitioners who come on a 6-month journey with us in a very bespoke and tailored personal development opportunity. If you'd like to read a little bit more about that, please visit the website. Do fill in the form so that you can receive all the news as it's released about how to enroll in those programs. I'll look forward to hosting you again with Simon next week. Have a great week.